Hey everybody, Dawn Zoldai here. Welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. We are halfway through January 2023. Can't believe it. We've dedicated this month to New Year, New Tech, and it was sponsored by Elsight and Speedbird Aero. Today we're starting off a three-part series with ModalAI called the ModalAI Ecosystem. And we are so lucky to have with us here today, not only Chad Sweet, the CEO of ModalAI, but Matthew Borowski, who is the program manager for Defense Innovation Units. It's a mouthful, bear with me. Defense Innovation Units Blue UAS Framework program. So great to have you both on the show, guys.
Thank you, Don. Really glad to be here. And thank you, Matthew, for joining.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Don, for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to start the show out kind of talking about the problem that you both are trying to solve in what you're doing in your organization. So Matthew, I'm going to start with you, since what Chad is doing ties directly into DIU's Blue UAS framework. There was a specific issue that the Blue framework was created to resolve, essentially, or address. Can you give us a little bit of background on that for those that don't know?
Absolutely, yeah. So DIU's Blue UAS Framework program really kicked off before Blue UAS was even a word. Before that, it was called the Group 1 UAV architecture. And simply what we're looking to do was to put some components from industry to test out a architecture that could be used to promote and develop DoD's small UAS. So initially what it was a concept that we were given from the Office of Secretary of Defense and asked to put some components in the mix. And so we used DIU's Commercial Solutions opening. We also call it CSO for short, to solicit industry and see what people had for components that they thought would be relevant here. When we first launched the program, it was very open-ended. We wanted to understand what was industry working on, why were they working on it, and how could it all benefit us. And so when we first launched the project, it was really any small UAS component could apply. We received, I think it was about 73 or maybe even 80 submissions. And out of that, we chose 5 companies to go on contract to develop these components for the DoD.
So Matthew, you used a term, the CSO. Is that like an RFP, but kind of a specialized thing that DIU has available to it?
It is, yeah. It isn't just an RFP. It actually is a competitive evaluation that we go through. It uses 10 U.S. Code 4022 authorities for the DoD to prototype technologies for the DoD. It's our weapon system. I mean, if DIU is a industry-facing organization to bring commercial tech to the DoD, that is our ability to affect the world. And so the CSO starts with what we call an AOI, an area of interest, and it ends with an OTA, which is other transaction agreement. The OTA is really what enables us to put a company on contract, to have them do certain tasks, and then we pay them for certain milestones. And that was one of the first OTAs was with ModalAI, with Chad here, who's on the call with us.
All right, awesome. And by the way, everybody, I just wanted to remind you that we are live and you have 2 incredible experts here. So make sure you're jumping in the chat, asking your questions, or at least tell us whether you're out there, where you're from, and give us some positive encouragement. We love all of that. But Matthew, in the midst of this Group 1, Group 2 project you're already working on, Congress passed the fiscal year 20 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 848. And you, I believe, or the Army actually was in the midst of its short-range reconnaissance program, looking for small UAS Group 1 and Group 2 to better the force there. So all these things kind of converged at the same time. And hence, is that how Blue was born, basically?
In a way, yes. Yeah, the NDA, rather, the fiscal year 20's 848 really came out while we're already working on SRR and working on Blue UAS Framework, at least the first version. We call it Blue UAS Framework 1.0 now. So we received that while we were already doing prototyping with companies. It was a bit of a perturbance, right? It didn't have us think differently and understand where that language could affect our programs. But ultimately, we were already on the right track before that even hit. It did provide guidance that we didn't have before, which was interesting when you're halfway through a program to get some new inputs that you've got to now work within. But we were able to work closely with the folks at OSD about how we would implement that section as well. You know, Congress puts the language down. The DoD is then up to the task to interpret that and make it work for us. And I think we've done a fairly good job at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is about trusted technology, cyber secure, sustainable, autonomous, things that can be interconnected, modular open system architectures, etc. And by the way, everybody, if you're not tracking Section 848 and you're in this industry, that is for the DoD, the ban on Chinese drones and components specifically. But what Matthew's saying is that they were already underway looking at all of these other relevant features. And so that's a great segue, I think, to talking to Chad a little bit, because Chad, you plugged into this program pretty early. So tell us, first of all, about Modal AI and why you created it, and then we're going to talk about that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So Modal AI, we started in 2018, right around the time of the Blue UAS, or as Matthew said, the Group 1 UAV architecture, in which we, funnily enough, had to ask after we were on contract. We were afraid to ask what Group 1 meant before we were on contract. After we were on contract, the first question was, so actually, what is a Group 1? And so we've got that figured out now. I think it means under 17 pounds or 17, 8, something like that.
I think it's under 20.
Yeah, it's the
20, anyway.
smallest. Yeah, it's the small. You know, DoD has their own lexicon for the sizes that doesn't track the FAA's terminology. So yeah, Matthew's of course, exactly right. So anyway, Chad, go on.
Yeah, so we spun out of Qualcomm, which Qualcomm's a large semiconductor company here in San Diego, California, and I had led robotics R&D there at Qualcomm, and we had built a lot of highly integrated, sophisticated technology around, of course, Qualcomm's processors to go put in unmanned aerial systems. And so when we started in 2018, we had a nice running start, and in fact, we had, I think 4 days after we formally left Qualcomm, I was pitching DIU on the Group 1 UAS architecture. And that led to, of course, us being involved in this framework program very early on. We had, in reference to the CSO that Matthew was talking about, we were made available. We read it and looked, oh my gosh, like, I think this is exactly what we want to do. And so that's how did we get involved? We read it, the language read exactly what we were already doing. It was like they had kind of put our product spec on the sheet of paper. So we applied and pitched, and I think by that November we were under contract, mid-November or so, 2018, under contract. And so then we were off to the races, and the output of that, well, we can give a little bit of a background. I don't know how deep we'll go later, but that we had our first generation Voxel, which highly leveraged what we were doing at Qualcomm.
Can you lift it up a little higher? Just
yep.
So oh, there you go. Okay, so is that the Voxel flight, Chad, that you're showing us right now?
So it's about to be, because that is what came out of that first generation program. So the Voxel Voxel, and then we have Flight Core, and then we fuse those two together into a single board configuration we call Voxel Flight. And
gotcha.
So that was the guts of that first framework effort.
Okay, and going back to Matthew, so clearly Chad was making autopilots, and they were interoperable, and perfect situation for him and Modal AI. But what other components are holistically part of the Blue UAS framework?
That's a good question, and it's changed a bit too, because NDAA's FY20 did affect what we did for Blue UAS Framework 2. But right now we kind of bucket into really 4 categories. One is software protocols. We've done a lot of work in software protocols. That includes ground control station software, flight control software, protocols by which they speak and communicate. We've done quite a bit of work with pairing and networking for small UAVs. That's kind of one big bucket that has a lot of folks that work underneath us doing that kind of work. The second, third, and fourth are very much tied to NDAA. Cameras are on there. That's one of the components that was called out as being, under policy by covered foreign countries. So cameras and gimbals became one of our topics of, of framework components. The third one would be flight controllers, also again under the NDAA, and the fourth would be data links and radios.
Interesting. I mean, we're not going to get into the debate here, but I know there's a bunch of drone pilots out there, especially in the public safety crowd, who would be like, what's the big deal of cameras? It's not the camera itself. It's like some kind of connection, right, to a back end internet or where it's going in the server. But very interesting that Congress went that way. By the way, everybody, we've got some folks in the chat I want to call out. We got Ramon Roche, Drone Code Foundation. We love Ramon. He's saying, can't wait to hear more. And Paolo De Petris is saying, asking Chad actually a question. When are you releasing an Ubuntu 20 image for the Voxel 2?
That's a good question. Getting very specific early on.
Very specific early on. We haven't even talked about Voxel 2, but I figured I'm going to forget to ask if I don't ask now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have built a Ubuntu 20 image. We're a little beholden to Qualcomm on that because kind of the core, we of course modify the kernel, modify the OS, but that core initial drop comes from Qualcomm. So we have to follow their roadmap, and we lag their roadmap, by 4 to 6 months or something like that. So we've built it internally. We have not done much testing, so it's coming. It's early in the year, so you always think early in the year, you're like, oh, it'll be just 3 months away, and then it takes longer than you think. But the first half of this year, I'd say pretty comfortably, Ubuntu 20 should be ready.
Okay, excellent. Now we've alluded to it, so I'm just going to talk about it, and I'm going to go back to Matthew. Matthew, we're in Blue Framework 2.0. So tell us kind of the transition there, and what's the difference between 1 and 2?
Yes, so 2.0 really happened in early 2020. We were started to plan for it a bit in 2019, but we knew we wanted to do a refresh. The first CSO that we did for Framework 1, which again had 5 OTAs issued, I believe, to 9 companies. There were a bunch of subcontractors involved. We began planning that late 2019. We issued the CSO, I think it actually was the Friday when the whole world shut down due to COVID, when we found out that, the sky's falling.
Yes.
So, that CSO ran. It was a bit different. We didn't do live pitches during that. We did everything virtually. And another piece that really, 2.0 was aided by was the ability to work with industrial policy under OSD. They assisted with some of the CARES Act funding that was given from Congress to assist with companies that were struggling due to COVID. So we actually were able to expand 2.0 from beyond it was initially to add more companies because of the partnership with DPA Title III at that time frame. But that really was a direct response to NDAA FY20. When that language came out in 2019, we looked at it and said, wow, we need to fill in the gaps. And that really was the catalyst for that 2.0. 2.0, we awarded everything in July of 2020. So again, during lockdown phases, we're still issuing contracts. And the new companies that came under 2.0, ModalAI, again, received an award. Flight controllers was part of the solicitation, so ModalAI received an award for the Voxel 2 development. We also worked with Doodle Labs on the Helix radio. We worked with Immervision on their Octopus camera, their low-light navigation camera, with Scadio on the Scadio Link low-cost ASIC-based data link. We also work with Vantage Robotics on a swappable gimbal camera interface system. And another company, actually not far from Chad, Obsidian Sensors, was working under them for a new type of microbolometer, a thermal camera. So, a lot of really good work, but again, you could tie it back to cameras, data links, and flight controllers, which again, the NDAA was now providing some guidance around.
By the way, Matthew, I have to give you guys huge props. Your website is spectacular. And so I know we're going to drop that link. There's a list of all the Blue companies that have received these awards, and a lot of information about this program. So absolutely check out that website if you want to learn more. And Chad, back over to you, because we have the Blue Framework, UAS Framework 2.0, and then along comes Voxel 2. So tell us about Voxel 2, and again, how it's different from your original Voxel and the Voxel flight.
Yeah, absolutely. So in short, it's a big upgrade. It's a big computing upgrade. And so it's a lot more capable, kind of refreshes to a much newer chipset, much newer architecture. It's built off of the Qualcomm QRB 5165, which is like an incredibly powerful system on a chip. So we've, a big part of our specialty, our knowledge is how to uncork all of that capability. So, internal to that SoC is a GPU, an NPU for neural processing, We've repurposed the sensors DSP for a flight control, so the flight controller is embedded on there. And so basically this is everything you need to fly a drone. Has inputs for 6 image sensors, so 2 big ISPs for video processing, plus you can ingress a number of computer vision sensors. And so all that can be integrated. All that's left really are the ESCs, motors, props, and you're kind of off flying and doing kind of incredible autonomous processing. So, and this is only 16 grams, which of course when you're fighting gravity, weight is all that really matters. And so it's a lightweight package and incredibly capable and low power. It kind of consumes between 5 and 7 watts on average as it's kind of flying around doing its thing. So, the competition generally is up to 10 times, weighs 10 times more and uses at least twice as much power. So this is like where the competitive advantage comes, and like, why is this worth doing, is this really gives you a lot more computing power per gram.
And Chad, if you can hold that up one more time, I just want to give people this perspective. This is smaller than a business card.
It is smaller than a business card, and it's like a flying super, or enables a flying supercomputer.
Wow, that's amazing. And oh, by the way, everybody, we've got a really cool video to roll. We're going to do that now because a picture paints 1,000 words. So here we go. Excellent. And by the way, we've got some more great questions out there. So I want to hit this one from John Sternitsky. Chad, this one's for you. Voxel 2 has some impressive vision-based videos for large-scale area flying. We need a lot of reference imagery. Will there be support for NVMe up to 2 TB?
So lots of storage. I guess I don't know the NVMe spec specifically and how to enable it. I'm sure the chipset's capable, whether we broke out all the signals or not, I can't say off the top of my head, but we do have USB 3, which you can certainly put a 2 terabyte, hard drive or 2 terabyte SSD connected with USB 3 and get very good performance. It would capture all the imagery. So, USB 3 is multi-gigabit. And so you'd be able to, there's definitely capability to expand image capture.
And John continues, the intent is to use Voxel 2 to operate in GPS-denied environments using vision. And we know that is the case. So maybe we can connect you guys after the show and you can continue the conversation for some very specific details on what John's trying to achieve. So that sounds great. So Matthew, back over to you. We talked about this 2.0 program. What were the and how it all ties back to Section 848 of the fiscal year 20 NDAA, those 4 different kind of component categories, for lack of a better term. What, as you evaluated, and I know not you personally, but as DIU evaluated the various entrants, what were you looking for? I think that's kind of the secret sauce that people are out there wondering, right? Because a lot of folks apply for these programs, and they're, not everybody is as lucky, I guess, or fortunate as Modal AI. So what are the kind of qualities, or what are the things you look for as you evaluate these proposals, if you will?
It's a good question. And before I address it, I actually want to address what John mentioned about using Voxel 2 for vision-based nav and complex environments, right? Areas we don't have GPS. I mean, what you're getting at here by looking at cameras, which John mentioned, having a lot of camera data coming in to support this, as well as the onboard processing of Voxel 2. That ability to navigate in complex areas is exactly what the DoD is looking for, right? You're seeing users adopt these framework components to use them for tools that ultimately may have a place in the battlefield or even in, on our installation someday. So, just the conversation about doing these complex tasks with drones, that's what the DoD is looking for. And this is a big reason why we did a framework, was to kind of spurn and start industry to have these components available. Without them, everyone's doing their own design and there isn't enough resources or people or funding for it to be sustainable. So doing it once with a company, which I think will get into my answer to your question, like Modal AI, enables industry to be better, right? We don't all need to solve the same low-level problems. We need to really be going after these complex use cases in order to be successful. But about your question, and I'll repeat if I'm off, let me know. But it's how do we select companies? Is that really more or less the
basically how do you do it?
Yeah, so it all starts with an area of interest. The AOI is what we put out to the world on DIU.mil. There should be a few AOIs out there now. I actually haven't seen in a few. I'm in project execution mode, so I'm not actually doing an active CSO right now. But when we start a project out, the AOI is what goes out to industry. And usually we get about 2 weeks to let that kind of sit there live. Yeah, right now there's 2 open ones on DIU.mil. So if anybody wants to go see what's out there,
check it out.
That's your chance. Yeah, exactly. So there's 3 phases to a CSO, and I'm going to break them down 1, 2, and 3. So phase 1 is we receive a white paper or essentially a pitch deck from a company. We're asking them to put down the best they can their solution to the problem that we pose in the AOI. So we're looking to see what a company has done in the marketplace, what problems have they solved that may be parallel to the DoD. We're looking for company viability. Is a company on a path to be able to sustain itself at some point? We're looking at novelty. Is it new, or do we already have that somewhere in our inventory? And obviously relevance. It has to be tied to the language that we put in the AOI. So those are the 4 things that we really look for. And we're trying to not look at them too quantitatively. It really comes down to just understanding, does the company understand what we're trying to get? And do we think we want to learn more about them? Really, that's the question we want to answer in phase 1 is, do we want to learn more about the solution? And if the answer is yes, then we move on to phase 2 with that company. If the answer is no, they receive what's called a non-select letter from our agreements officer. It simply means, you know what, not this time, or not this CSO, maybe some future work, but not right now. So phase 2 is where it gets really more, I think, collaborative, interactive. And by the way, the teams that work on these evaluations with us, they're pretty broad. We bring in folks from different military services, from OSD, work a lot with the FFRDC, so MIT Lincoln Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. We work with these other, we call them SMEs, subject matter experts, to help us evaluate what we're looking at, you know. So phase 2 is where it gets interesting. We call it the pitch phase. And we like to have in-person pitches when possible. They could be at the vendor site, they could be at a site that we host, they could be virtual, but in some way we have a meeting where we're talking through, the company gives us their full run through of their solution. And then we have a lot of time for Q&A, and ideally we have some kind of demonstration or something that we can physically look at, touch, interact with, etc. And so this is really where we understand more about what the company's doing, what the solution could be, and what we may want to dig more into. So after we finish up phase 2, there's a period of time where we spend with the companies asking follow-on questions. Everything gets worked through our agreements officer, who's the warranted AO to actually work on behalf of the government for issuing contracts. And the end result is that we make a decision out of those phase 2 companies that have pitched to us, who we want to work with. And that's the question we answer after that, is who do we want to work with as a result of this? And that answer is then turned into a RPP. It's a request for prototype proposal. That's a document that goes out to a company, and it says the government wishes to go into a formal negotiation with you. We give them a draft statement of work that we've worked on, which includes all the elements we might want to see. It's not open-ended, but there is quite a bit of area we're asking the company to fill in the blanks. And then that becomes like usually a 2-week negotiation about what are we doing, how much will it cost, what are we going to see when, and if that is ultimately wished by the government to go forward, we then turn that phase 3 reply to the RPP into an OTA. And the OTA is our agreement that we work under. That gets turned into a program plan, and then we're off to the races.
I have to say, Matthew, I've heard a lot of these briefings, and I will be honest, this is the best explanation I've heard of the thought process and the criteria that you use. Honestly, not just saying that. And so good on you. Thank you for that. I've
done a lot of these, Don.
Well, I'm just telling you, like the transparency of, hey, here's our thought process, and this is like the checklist, if you will. That's really important, because I think a lot of people had that question in their mind. Speaking of questions, we've got 2 more great ones for you, Matthew. But before we get to that, clearly Chad and his team were awarded not only Blue 1.0, but 2.0, and we've got a cool video to roll on that real quick, and then we'll get to those questions.
Introducing Voxel 2, the smallest, smartest Blue UAS framework autopilot at 16 grams. Enable smaller, smarter, and safer drones and robots with Voxel 2. To learn more about Voxel 2, visit modalai.com/voxel-2.
All right, very good, very good. All right, so really, really good questions out here, Matthew. By the way, if you're on LinkedIn, it depends on your settings. We may not see your name. In this case, we don't. So that's why I'm not saying who you are. LinkedIn user, is the intent for DIU to serve as the clearinghouse for the DoD, or is there a game plan for the branches and individual units to self-certify at some point?
Yeah, and real quick, going back to the previous topic just for a quick second, one thing that doesn't work well is when you ask the DoD or tell us, we'll do whatever you want. That does not work well for a DIU prototype OTA. What works really well is when you tell, this is what we've done, here's what we've accomplished, do you want to jump on board? That works really well. So for those of you that are thinking of submitting to a DIU CSO AOI, right? The best thing you can do is really tell your story, know what you're doing. The more results you have out there, the better shot you have at getting onto an OTA. We don't really work well with companies that are, kind of bespoke, will do whatever you're asking us to do. That doesn't work that well because we don't want to be the forcing function for what you're building. We want industry and the commercial market to really serve as that, and we're going to help you out. But ultimately, we don't want to build things just for us. Everything we're doing is dual use.
I think before we get back to that question, that's a great point, because I think that's really what distinguishes DIU and what you're doing from some of the other, we'll call them traditional technology transfer programs, right? Which are oftentimes the government, federal lab partnering with industry to, no kidding, create something together possibly. And here what you're saying is, no, we kind of want to see what you've got and see if we're going to onboard that and if it fits what we're trying to achieve. So that is definitely a different mindset and goal. So I think that's really important for people to understand. So thank you for that. So back to LinkedIn users question. Is there a plan to allow or to have the other services self-certify, if you will, Section 848 type components for UAS or individual units to do that?
Certainly. I mean, we aren't even now the clearinghouse for the DoD. I mean, we work with the Blue UAS cleared list through ANS, but there are other programs out there and other DoD partners that are working on similar aspects, the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, Navy. So we're just one of many. Maybe we're the most reachable, I guess, or maybe the most transparent, but we aren't the sole clearinghouse for anything for the DoD for SUAS. We, I think, serve in kind of a bespoke or maybe de facto function of being experts in commercial SUAS for the DoD. But that's more or less just based on what we've been doing, not any kind of formal role.
I interviewed Shelby Ox previously. He used to be with the, your DIU Blue UAS program with Military Embedded Systems. It was an event they had last March. He was a keynote. We did a fireside, and that's important too, to foot stomp what you just said, Matthew, that this isn't the only entry point into the DoD for a UAS company or a component making manufacturer, right? Like, there's other opportunities, so keep your eyes open. There's lots of places to look. DIU, like you said, is just an excellent place to go because you've really honed this. And the next question is, let's see, that was the clearinghouse one. I thought I saw one from Chris Geneseth.
And I will add, Don, real quick, for companies working with the DoD that aren't working through DIU, you can always ask whoever your sponsor in the DoD entity is to come work with DIU as well. We aren't doing this for ourselves, we're doing it for others. So if you have somebody out there who you want to work with and they're not sure how to work with you, you can point them to DIU. We can have a conversation, gov to gov, and figure out how we could do a program that brings that kind of technology in. So important to know that if you have government contacts and they're confused how to make this happen, just come talk to us. We can go, again, direct to each other and figure out if we could make a program out of their requirements.
Well, and that's another great point. You're obviously DoD, and Section 848 only applied to the DoD, but by policy, a number of federal agencies adopted similar bans, right, on certain components and certain drones, and you know, you work with them when those federal agencies ask you for assistance. So all great points. And the next question here is from our buddy Chris Genesith. Chris is a regular in Clubhouse and a fan of the program here. He says, is DIU looking for one winner per vertical or CSO, if you will, or is it open to competition?
And I'm not sure what you mean by winner. I guess if you mean by put on OTA, the answer would be no. You know, we issue OTAs to anybody who we think has technology that could solve the AOI. Now, again, it has to be, you know, we call it kind of like your insurance has rolling, you know, rolling admission or rolling, what they call applications, right? We're not always open to receive these submissions. There's a period of time where they are, and you'll know about them from DIU.mil. But when we do issue an AOI, we don't say up front, there's one company per vertical. We explore what's out there, and then we sort of we have a budget, obviously, that we've got to adhere to. We figure out what can we do within that budget, and that really comes down to not just our requirements, but also what are we seeing that's interesting. You know, if we go in there thinking we want 2 different data links and suddenly there's 3, there's no reason why we couldn't add a 3rd. This comes down again to making sure the money's there.
Absolutely, it's always about the money, isn't it? So, Chad, I want to talk to you a little bit about this, because we alluded to it earlier. The fact that your Voxel 2 is basically a supercomputer. It's enabling GPS denied navigation, all kinds of things that the DoD cares about, you know, out in the field in unique environments. Can you elaborate? You know what? I think we have a really cool photo. I know I'm going out of order to my producer. Sorry, Mike. Can we throw up the DARPA photo? Yay. Okay. So can we talk a little bit about like how some of these things, how like some of the DoD or DoD related agencies are using Voxel 2?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly try. It's hard to say for sure.
Well, let's talk about this one at least, because
yeah.
we know for sure what this is, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a picture from a test event for the DARPA offset program, which is a swarming robots, quad rotor, and fixed wing program. So you can Google it and find, you know, they have websites dedicated to it and so forth. But this was like a multi-agent system. I think you know, there were hundreds, maybe 300 plus robots of various shapes and sizes operating from a central control, having swarm behaviors. And I believe they were trying to find an April tag or something like that. You know, they were trying to basically in a hidden spot find something. And so in this case, they used what we had for Blue UAS Framework 1.0, which was our reference platform we call Voxel M500, which is like a development drone designed for, one, it's programmable, which I think is really ultimately why it was used for that program. And this is, there were 2 actual performers in this, and we worked closely with the Raytheon BBN folks for this. And so it was programmable, it was, you know, blue, they were able to go build new use cases that were not typical there. So most of the UAS you find out there are not open in any way, shape, or form. Whereas we put all of the source code up, we really pride ourselves in having like incredible access. The goal is like a real, you know, what they refer to as MOSA or modular open software architecture. And so it's built around standard frameworks like Mavlink, which was the command and control for the swarm. And so yeah, so I'm sure, you know, DIU and Matthew at the conception of the framework program weren't necessarily thinking, you know, DARPA swarming program, but those are the kinds of things that have fallen out. We work with tons of different R&D labs throughout the government, and not just DoD either. The you know, Department of Energy, Department of Interior, the NASA JPL. We work with a bunch of labs. It's hard to say all of them. I wonder if anybody actually has a list of all of the labs.
Oh, actually, there is. Fun fact.
There is somewhere?
No, there is. So there's a website. It's an amazing website. It's called the FLC, Federal Laboratory Consortium. And if you Google that and you go on there and you say, hey, I want access to a wind tunnel, you can do a search and you can find in the United States, like every place where you could probably get access to a free wind tunnel through the federal government and their associated labs. It's an incredible website. I wrote an article on this for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine a while ago. If you dig deep on my P3 Tech website, you will find it. But I talk all about technology transfer and all the different opportunities out there. But FLC is an amazing organization and incredible bunch of resources they put out. By the way, Brett Fedderson's out there. He said Offset, the DARPA Offset, is a great program, so he agrees. And Chad, you are working with so many people. You know, Matthew, you mentioned this is all about dual use technology. So most people out there may know what that means. Could you explain what that is, Matthew, and why that is important to DIU?
Yes, certainly. We use a topic or maybe a term we call fast follower. So the idea is that the DoD doesn't invent a lot of things, right? We have to then rapidly adopt them into our missions, our capability sets. So, you know, when we're not the first movers, we've got to be the fast followers. And really what it means is areas where industry is already making incredible products and services and capabilities, we need to be quickly able to adopt those in. So it all really came back to DIU when we were DIUX's inception. You know, late Secretary Ash Carter, you know, really embraced this topic and created DIU as a place for industry to go to find a home, right? If you're doing interesting things in the commercial market, here's a place for Silicon Valley, and back then that's really where we're headquartered, to work with the Pentagon. You know, we since have then expanded into Boston and Austin, Texas, and now Chicago. But the whole concept comes down to being able to be used in industry, but have a home as well in the military.
And Voxel and Modal AI are a great example of that, Chad. Not only, you know, do you work with folks like DARPA and all these other federal labs, and obviously the services are somehow secretly, and we can't talk about it much, employing your Voxel too, right, in what they're using out there. But really cool companies like Clio are using it too. I know we have an interesting, so this is the drone nut, everybody, and this is a little GIF of that. So we'll roll it like 3 times here, one more time to get the idea. But tell us a little bit about Clio Robotics and like how they're employing Voxel 2 and what we just saw there.
Yeah, so that drone nut, yeah, actually is still using Voxel 1 to the best of my knowledge. But yeah, they've built a little indoor asset inspection UAS that can fly and bump into things, and it has a very unique propulsion system. It's like 2 rotor system that fits into that circular enclosure, as opposed to your more traditional quad rotor motor configuration. And yeah, so that we engaged with them early on, probably engaged with them while we were at Qualcomm, probably, and so they were an early customer of Modal AI, and they built, and so, you know, now they're out deployed. I think, you know, one of the lessons on all of this is really how long it takes for these different platforms to get to market, you know, broadly in production and kind of mass scale. You know, we look really, which kind of hones in on our goal, is to accelerate our customers' path towards these advanced capabilities, right? So on that UAS, they've got like sensors that can do mapping. It flies with GPS denied vision technology, and, you know, so those things can really help get that product to the next level in a much quicker fashion. You know, we're building, our software stack is built off of you know, 10 years of development at this point, you know, with many engineers. So it's quite a chunk of capability to make available to our customers so that they don't have to repeat that. And that's really the main value proposition of Voxel and Voxel 2 and our Voxel SDK, and to put it all together. And I don't know if we were going to talk about, you know, one of our kind of pure a lot of our customers are also dual use. So
You're right,
you know,
right. I think I did just see Clio get some kind of a contract. I don't remember, but I did read that recently. Yeah,
absolutely. So, and I think they did, yeah, exactly, get a nice Army contract to advance their platform. And so, along the lines of dual use, you know, the government's a big UAS customer. So you see even you see these NDAA effects trickle down into law enforcement and other government agencies that are not DoD, and they really start to. So then, if the share of your market continues to expand on who cares about NDAA compliance or who cares about, you know, non-Chinese components, to get specific, as that market expands, you have to, almost all UAS manufacturers really have to be focused on that, because in some way, shape, or form, you have to be dual use to be in the UAS market. And so, in a lot of ways, but one of our more pure play ones, we have a customer called Corvus Drones, and they build greenhouse inspecting drones, which is really super cool. Like, it flies through the greenhouse autonomously with no, you know, there's no GPS. You're in an enclosed scenario, and it's taking pictures of the crop and plants along the way, and it sends that to the cloud for analysis. And so that's a fun one to talk about, because it really is. And then, of course, yeah, I mentioned JPL as well. We work with them on a few projects, and so, you know, those are, you know, supposed to not be on the planet and get out of here. So those are fun too.
Well,
I'd like to make a point here too, if I could, about,
please.
you know, we're talking about NDAA. We really talk mostly about hardware. I mean, there is talk about GCS software in that clause as well. But what I would like to talk about, and even challenge industry to go after, is a lot of people like to focus on the hardware. And the hardware is important, but really what's going to enable the future of drones is not going to be the hardware. We solved a lot of the hardware issues. You know, ModalAI's VOXL 2 is ahead of its time hardware-wise. Work on the software. Work on the piece that really is impactful. Because what we see a lot is industry say, we built a really cool hardware platform, add whatever software you want on there, and that's where we fall flat. What software do you mean? Who's developing it? You know, if we spend all our resources working on the hardware and nobody's putting that advanced software to do the advanced use case solution, we're doing it wrong, right? We like the method where you have a common hardware platform that you add your flavor on top of. You add your software that truly enables that platform to be better. If we keep doing that, we're going to get ahead, promise you.
Well, and that's where all these partnerships are really critical, right? For both Matthew and Chad, you know, to have this interoperability. I mean, you mentioned Doodle Labs and the radio, and I know that's interoperable with Voxel as well. And, you know, so many other companies that are working with Modal AI, which is frankly why we're doing a series. So we'll have another show next month. Fun fact. But I want to talk about what's next, because we just talked about what's new. We talked about where we've come from, but let's talk about what's on the horizon. So Matthew, first over to you. Are we looking at a Blue 3.0 anytime soon? I'm sure that's a question on everybody's mind.
The answer is yes, and the follow-on is I can't talk about it before it's really released. So
gotcha.
Stay tuned.
Dang it, those dang lawyers. Let's see. Oh, interesting. And maybe this is for both of you. So this is from Jonathan Songer, also another one of our regulars. He's, by the way, in the Middle East right now, having horrible weather from yesterday's podcast. Jonathan says, do you have any customers looking for or at, quote, drone in the box type solutions for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, high yield explosive post-attack recon, assuming that's not behind an NDA?
Yeah, it's really tough for us to talk about things going on, yeah, until they're really launched. So we probably both legally need to be quiet, and then also just, you know, out of common business practice, have to stay fairly quiet. But once something gets announced, we will talk about it for sure. So stay tuned. Our marketing team posts a lot on LinkedIn and so forth, and so follow us on LinkedIn, and hopefully we'll share some news about those sorts of things in the future.
Yeah, it's a critical use case, not just for the military side, but clearly just domestically as well. Seaburn. So
if we pull that thread just a second, Don,
yeah,
like
yeah,
if you look at the elements that make drone in a box successful, which obviously it sounds like a great capability, but think of the components that have to be in place. You know, one is remote operation, which we don't have a good path forward for, right? There's especially DoD, we have policies that prevent that. You look at networking, right? The ability to network your system, we don't have that either, right? So until we kind of figure out how to get policy that allows for these more advanced use cases, can't put a solution in place until that happens. So that's one thing that we face a lot of, is not just technology, but also trying to influence policy, right? Influence what we can do in the DoD. Because if you ask us, right, we're seeing industry adapt these network systems and remotely piloted systems. We need to have that as well for our small UAS. We can't just assume it's one operator, one drone. So that's, looking ahead, whenever you have anything advanced that you want to bring to the military DoD, always think about what do we have to face in order to get that adopted? What are the underlying issues that may be scar tissue from 20 years ago that we have to delete, repeal, remove before we can allow that to happen?
Well, and from a transparency standpoint, Matthew, most people that are not within the DoD, even a lot of people within the DoD, don't know what those policies are, right? That might be limiting factors or stumbling blocks. So I've been out of the game a little bit since 2018, active duty, and a couple years as a civilian, but I wasn't tracking, that you couldn't do remote operations with a small UAS. We've been doing with the flipping large ones for years. So that's kind of weird to me, but moving aside, we are actually a little bit over time already, which is insane. Time has flown. Chad, I'm going to give this over to you to talk about what's next for Modal AI, and then we'll do a quick wrap up from both of you.
Yeah, what's next? Don't want to be too forthright, but yeah, we expect within the next few months to have some big announcements, potentially smaller platform of Voxel 2, potentially another reference UAS that highlights some of what you can do in such a small form factor. So those are definitely things we're working on. Hard to put specific dates out there, but we're working hard on putting out more capability, very, very hard every single day.
All right, awesome. I'm going to let you then, Chad, tell everybody how they can reach you and any concluding thoughts, and then we'll end with Matthew.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. That's easy. Check our website. We have a lot of great content, and I'd like to, for those that are interested in developing with Voxel 2, docs.modalai.com, forum.modalai.com, and code.modalai.com are the key resources to go make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Matthew, you get the last word here today as our special guest.
Awesome. Yeah, I will say if everybody I worked with was as good as Chad and team, like my job would be easier because Chad and team do phenomenal work at Modal AI. His team has grown from, I think it was 3 when we first worked together, Chad, and now it's north of 40.
About that, yeah.
About that, yeah. So it's been an incredible journey working with you and your team.
Thank you, likewise.
It's our hope that DIU's Blue UAS program continues, that we continue to serve as the DoD's front door for small UAS commercial technologies, but we can't do what we do without industry doing what they do. And we know how challenging it can be, especially in down economic times, to get the funding and resources you need. But stay hungry, stay nimble, keep developing. There will be a time where we'll be asking for more tech, and we hope that you're ready.
So keep your eyes open, everybody, and watch both of these individuals, these incredible gentlemen, and the organizations they represent. So thank you both so much. Great show. That is all she wrote. We are out here.